All right, good morning and welcome to episode of Breakfast Analysis. To start things off, you'll notice I'm rocking the Edmonton Oilers jersey. I'm recording this on the 7th, which is a couple of hours before Game 4 happens between the Oilers and the Blackhawks, the Stanley Cup playoffs right now. This will be going out after that game has finished, the morning after the game concludes. So just know that if the Oilers got eliminated by the 12th seed out of the West, that I'm sad and crying somewhere. But we're here to talk about Siege. We're not here to talk about hockey, and there's a lot of Siege to talk about too. The good thing about the Oilers being eliminated early, if it happened, I hope it didn't, is that I have something still to watch. The NA Major, of course, is coming up, and as much as I do like hockey, that's a little bit more exciting in my mind. It's coming up next week for North America. We've already got a couple of the regions underway. APAC started earlier this week. Latin America started the other day as well. Europe will be starting after North America finished, so they'll be the final major to conclude. But NA starts next week, and so I'm here to talk a little bit about the teams, who's got the best shot, what's going to happen, a little bit of a preview for you guys so that you can be a little bit prepared going into the major. So without further ado, let's jump into things. We're going to start going team by team in terms of seeding. That means we're starting with Space Station Gaming, the number one seed coming into the major. Space Station Gaming went 4-1 this season. They won against E United, Disrupt Gaming, and Dark Zero, and then versus Oxygen, they got a win and a loss. Of course, that was the loss early on in the season, and then came back to win it in the rematch. Space Station Gaming have looked really, really good. Obviously, they have a 49% win rate on attack, which is pretty even. That's about fourth in the league. And they have the best defensive win rate in the league at 61%. They have a 55% opening kill rate, leads into a 67% win rate with the opening kill. They got two players in the top 10 by CGG rating. Rampy is rated 5th. Rampy has always been a star player for Space Station. He's been that big fragger. He's been the opening pick guy who's going to run in and get those kills. He's been doing that really well this season. Space Station have never been a team that's focused on big individual plays. They've always been more team focused. But if you have to pick out a standout player who's going to get the most kills, typically it's going to be Rampy. He's been filling that job really well so far, particularly in the last half of the season, but all throughout he's been quite consistent. And Bosco coming in with 6. I think Bosco is maybe the most underrated player in the league. I think that he doesn't really get as much praise as he should on Space Station Gaming. Ridiculously clutch player, plays a couple more of those supportive roles. A lot of the time he's not on those heavy fragging operators, but he gets put in these situations where it's like clutch or lose, and he clutches a lot more often than most people. So Bosco's a really dependable player, which I think is super important for Space Station. He's contributed a lot of rounds just on his own because the rest of the team falls, and it's sort of left up to him. So he's been stepping up big time for this team. Absolutely going to be one of those players that you need to watch. But if he goes cold, that could be a problem for Space Station. Not that I think they need to worry about it. I think that Space Station Gaming, this is the first time they've bled in a long time. Since becoming the world champions, they hadn't lost a game until that match against Oxygen. They haven't lost a game since that match against Oxygen either. But it proves that they are immortal, and I don't think there was ever a huge amount of doubt. Space Station, over the course of their history, have never looked like an unstoppable team. They just look like a team that consistently, with ridiculous consistency, pull out tight games. They always seem to walk away with the W, even when it could go either way. It seems like it should be a coin flip. How do they win 90% of the coin flip games? I don't know. But I think it really does speak to sort of their mental state. Obviously, they're a very well-structured team. If something starts going wrong, they're very quick to fix it. They're not really one to dwell on that type of stuff mentally. And I think Space Station, that's a big reason why their success has continued over such a long period of time. That one game against Oxygen, they didn't look like their best. They played a little bit off, not taking anything away from Oxygen. That was maybe Oxygen's best game that they played in a long time. And Oxygen are looking better. We'll get to them later, of course. But Space Station, I would say, looked better in Split 2, or in Phase 2, I should say. And they're looking really good coming to this major. They've got great preparation, great coordination, amazing individual plays when it's needed. Space Station Gaming has always been the whole package. Over the last 6 months, they've proven time and time again they are the best team in North America. They're going to be the favorites coming into this tournament. If anything, I don't know, their attacks aren't amazing. They're really, really good, but they're not the best in the league. They're relatively average, but that's still quite good. Average against the level of competition they've been going against is really, really impressive. So maybe something will slip up for them, but I don't think that's likely. I've I've paid the price for betting against Space Station in the past, and it's not something I'm going to do again. I think Space Station should be the favorites to take this tournament. But again, keep in mind, they're all been close games, and any one of those teams that are in this major have the potential to upset. So Space Station are not going to have an easy time winning this one. We'll talk about TSM next. They went 4-2 in the regular season. They won against Tempo Storm, lost against Dark Zero, won against the Sonics, lost against Oxygen, won against Dark Zero, won against Oxygen. So for the first 4 games, they went really back and forth, and particularly like they're winning against some pretty, like some definitely lower level teams, and they're losing against the higher level teams. So Tempo Storm, I mean, that should be an easy win, and they won it. Sonics, particularly earlier on in the season, which this was relatively early on in the season, another like, you should win that one, and they do. And then they're tough opponents, like they lose to Dark Zero, they lose to Oxygen, and then when it matters, they start winning. They win their game against Dark Zero. That secured them their spot inside of the major. That forced Dark Zero to play in the qualifier, and they won a somewhat pointless game against Oxygen as well. TSM have a really balanced, and throughout the entire season, they've had a very balanced win rate on both attack and defense. It's always been pretty equal on both fronts. They got a 52% win rate on attack and a 52% win rate on defense, and throughout the whole season, this has been consistent. They will go up together, those percents, or they'll go down together, but they won't often, you'll not see that shift very often. Which I think is good. I think it's good to have that type of stability. However, when you put in the context of the league, it does look a little bit lopsided. 52% makes them the second best attacker team based on the previous stats, but only 7th in terms of defense, which is obviously quite low for an 8-team league. So, yeah, I mean, you're expecting a team to do a little bit better on defense than TSM have been. But again, that's still over 50% for both. They're against a really high level of competition in the latter half of the season, so I don't think they need to be too worried about it. They've only got a 50% chance to get that opening pick. They only have a 50% rate at getting that opening pick, but it has led to a 76% win rate, which is the highest in the league. So they can be at least happy about that, and I think that getting more of those opening picks will do a lot of good for TSM. They have 2 players in the top 10 as well. Chala just squeaks into the top 10 spot. He got 10th in terms of the highest rated players. Chala has been the new addition to this team, obviously, and he's been really good. Playing, again, more of those supportive flank watch type roles, which don't often get all the glory, but he's another player, kind of like Bosco, who's been getting a lot of those clutches. He's really been winning some specific rounds for his team. You could make arguments that maybe the rest of the team wasn't really fitting into the team as much around him. There were maybe some struggles with him coming into the roster. However, they seem relatively ironed out now. TSM have been looking a lot better, and Chala has been fitting in perfectly. You wouldn't notice that he was a new player if you didn't know it. And then their other player, the star player on this team, Bolo, really has had a good season. He's the third highest rated player inside of the league in the NAL US division. And, I mean, the kid's just nuts. He's been good ever since they picked him up, but this is the best he's looked probably in a long time. DreamHack Montreal was another big tournament for him a while ago. But this is a long, consistent strain of just Bolo seems to be on every single time. He's playing a lot of IQ recently. He's been filling up on the Zofia as well, particularly in the latter half of the season. He swapped a lot over to Zofia. TSM had an interesting sort of attacker lineup a lot of the times in the early half of the season, where they ran no Zofia, which in the utility dump meta is a really big question mark. They would run Ashe IQ instead. Bolo would be jumping on that IQ, caused Dark Zero caused TSM to have easily the highest IQ pick rate out of any team in the league, but Bolo has more recently gone off of that. He still does play IQ quite a bit, and so do some other players on this team. Merc's been playing it a little bit as well. Not the craziest operator to flex onto, but the stats for IQ have definitely been skewed thanks to TSM. So it's nice to see Bolo thriving with that G8, of course, and certainly making it look like one of the best guns in the game. I think overall, TSM have been known for their flashy plays. Their roam game is really well coordinated. I think that's something where Merc has stepped up quite a bit. Obviously, he had a really poor start to the season, but as it went on, he's gotten a lot better. He had some big plays that really started to pick up some steam for him. He had an ace a couple of weeks ago as well, which really did, I think, kind of invigorate himself in the team. And he's been playing, a lot better Siege in the second phase, particularly in these last couple of games, when it mattered against Dark Zero, and then, the last game in the season against Oxygen as well. Those were some really big ones for him. C4s and throwables have always looked good. I mean, achieved on that role has been that's his whole career. He's throwing grenades and he's tossing C4s, and that's kind of who he is. And he's not disappointed this season. Overall, TSM's improvement over the first half seemingly is looking quite good. Chala is fitting in a little bit better. The team is playing around Chala quite a bit better. Merc is stepping up a little bit more. I think the team's just playing better, like, as a unit. And Bolo's just been insane all season long. That hasn't really been an improvement factor for them. That's just, Bolo is continuing to be great. So TSM looked quite good. Again, though, there are worries based on how they played earlier on in the season. And I know teams were kind of discrediting TSM, saying they didn't look as good with Chala. I think TSM, even at the end of Pro League Season 11, didn't look like amazing. They looked quite good, but, there were some losses there I think they didn't want to take. As long as those are behind them and none of those issues creep back up again, TSM are in a good position to win this major as well. But that's an if that I can't 100% confidently say we don't have to worry about. Auction Esports come next. They went 3-2 in the regular season. They won against Disrupt Gaming, Space Station, and TSM. And then they had rematches against Space Station and TSM and lost them both. If TSM got a lot better as the season progressed, Oxygen seems to get worse. I want to put an asterisk on that because their record was 3 wins followed by 2 straight losses. However, those 2 losses were technically irrelevant, and this did happen at the end of Pro League Season 11 as well, where by the end of the season, games didn't really matter. They lost some games that you wouldn't expect them to lose. It's really difficult as an analyst to say, how much that matters to Oxygen Esports. Whether it matters, whether they're sitting there thinking, all right, this game doesn't matter, let's not give it our all. Whether they're thinking, saying, we don't care, we're going to give everything every single game. Or whether they think they're giving everything every single game, but, in the back of the mind, when it gets tense, they're like, well, there's a voice in their head that says, this doesn't matter. If I don't clutch this, it's okay. It's tough. It's tough to say there. But I think it's reasonable to believe that there's probably some truth to the fact that they're not playing to the best of their abilities when there's not as much on the line, which is good for us because it means that this major, they should play with everything they've got because every single game is going to matter. You always have a chance at the title. It's not a GSL format. Let's make that clear if anybody's not aware. The major is a double elimination tournament. That means if you lose once, you can still win it. It's not like the qualifier, so please keep that in mind. There's every single game is going to matter if you want to get that first place, which obviously Oxygen do. So they did quite good in the games that matters, and even in those losses against Space Station and TSM, they were really close. And so I don't want to sit here and be like they tanked those last 2 games because they could have easily won those ones. Let's talk a little bit more stats. 41% win rate on attack. That's, again, pretty even. That's 5th in the league. 41 doesn't sound good, but 5th in the league. You'll notice that is a pretty large gap between 4th and 5th in the league, though. Space Station had 49% win rate on attack, and they were 4th in the league. Oxygen 5th in the league with 41%. Not great, but their defense makes up for it. 61%, just below Space Station. Space Station also had 61%, but when you expand the decimals, Oxygen just barely become the 2nd best team in the league defensively. So really good there, and that gap was a lot wider at the start of the season between their attacking win rate and their defensive win rate. It has shrunk quite a bit. They were, for a long time, I think, the worst, the 2nd worst attacking team and the best defensive team. And so they've closed into a little bit more neutral ground, similar to where TSM are at. So that's nice to see. I think that you want that if you're Oxygen Esports. You don't like being a lopsided team. I know a lot of that has come from the fact that trying to add a little bit more structure into their play style. That's something that they talked about at the beginning of the season. I think it's clear that has worked, particularly on their attacks. They're looking more structured while still giving themselves some flexibility. There's some things to work on there with attack for sure, but it's definitely looking better than what we've seen from them in previous seasons. 49% at the opening pick, which is the worst out of the qualifier, but not bad as a league whole. Leads to a 70% win rate when they get that opening pick, which is pretty average. That's pretty good. Typically 70%, 65 to 70, closer to 70 is usually where that average sits. One player in the top 10, and that's Laxing, 4th highest rated player in the league. Laxing has been ridiculously good player for the team. He's on that flank watch role, usually on attack. He's playing those Nomad Gridlock style operators. He's talked a lot about how he's just, he's doing his job. He's playing his role. He's listening to the calls from his captain, and he's doing what he's told, which I think is a humble way for him to put it. But it comes down to a lot of clutches. It comes down to him being in the right position at the right times. And, of course, he hits every single shot that he needs to. So Laxing's been a ridiculously good player for Auction Esports, and nobody's ever going to take that away from him. I think really those last two games, those losses came down to just losing the mental state, particularly against Space Station on Coastline. That was one where it seemed like, I think it was round 15, might have been round 14, either way. Final round in overtime, and they just sort of stare at the bomb site. It's like clearly something's not working mentally in that way. But overall, their gameplay's been really good. And Auction Esports, I think, came into the season looking like the underdogs. People talked about the big three in North America. Now I think people are, across the board, at least talking about the big four. I think some people are talking about big five, including Sonics in that discussion as well, which I think is valid. But certainly nobody's doubting Auction Esports anymore. And so even if they get dead last in this major, I think they've proven a lot, and they should be proud of how they finished. But they're not going to be content with that. They're going to be fighting for that first place, of course. Last but not least, Dark Zero across the regular season and the qualifier went 4-2. They won against Sonics. They won against TSM. That a really good first phase, but then they lost against Space Station. They lost against TSM. Weren't able to make it directly into the major. Inside the qualifier, they beat Mirage and they beat Sonics. So again, going into those qualifiers, a little bit easier of games probably, but you still don't want to take those games away from them. Those were tough ones that Dark Zero pulled out, and I think Sonics proved a lot of people wrong on how well they played. Their attacks have been the best in the league, and they've been that way all season long. 57% attacker win rate is ridiculous. It might not sound that big compared to the defensive win rates, but that is insane. But it's balanced out by 47% defensive win rate. I believe the only team that's negative on defense, I'm going to double check this, but yeah, it's TSM. We just talked about them. They got 52%. So 47% defensive win rate is quite bad for Disrupt Gaming. They're or Dark Zero, I should say. Excuse me. They're a really odd case of a team that seems to struggle a lot on defense, which is considered to be the easier side, and does a lot better on attack. 51% opening kill percentage, and they get 73% of rounds. They've gotten 73% of rounds where they get that opening pick, which is it's fine. Opening pick stats, those are good. Again, I think that Dark Zero, a lot of people would talk about the fact that it kind of comes down to them not adapting well when they're defending and the attackers don't really do things they expect. Dark Zero are a very structured team. Some would say overly structured. It means that if you can throw things at them they're not ready for, that can really mess them up, and that's something that other teams in the league have talked about when going against Dark Zero. And they say, you know what, in the post-game interview, we beat them. We just threw stuff that they weren't expecting because we know that's what they're not good at. Maybe those mid-round adaptations, that's just really dealing with the unknown has been a big problem for Dark Zero, and it's something that will need to be addressed. I don't feel like it's been thoroughly fixed by this team. They've said that they've worked on it. They said that they think it's looking better, but they've also said they know it's their weakness, and I think it's still their weakness, and it's still going to be something to watch out for come the major. They have one player inside of the top 10, and I don't need to tell you who it is. It's the highest rated player in the league. It's Hyper. Hyper's the star player for this team. He's probably the best player inside of North America. Obviously the highest rated player. That doesn't necessarily mean the best player. But he probably is the best player in this case. He's been ridiculous all season long. And again, it sort of speaks to the lopsidedness of Dark Zero. I'm not saying any of their players have been bad, but it's they have to some extent been carried by Hyper. Not fully. Obviously, it's a team game, and I think that to put even 70% of the rounds on Hyper would be too much of an exaggeration. 60, 50, those are way too high of numbers. But he's certainly been contributing more than 20%, which would be 1/5 of the team. There's no doubt about that. He's been really pulling his weight, and that's led to a lot of round wins from Hyper. Looking at the qualifier, Hyper was also the highest rated player there. He actually did worse than his average in the regular season, but he still managed to get the highest rated spot, which kind of speaks to how good he is as a player. Skies really stepped up in the qualifier, and not that he was silent in the regular season, but he was an average player. He was doing his job. I believe he went straight even in terms of kill death in the regular season, and he comes in the qualifier and he just has some incredible clutch plays against the Sonics, some individual plays as well where he drones himself in and he gets some kills. Skies was really impressive, and if Skies plays like he did in the qualifier, this could very well be a Dark Zero major and then finally getting that #1 spot. I thought Eclipse and Hot and Cold also played better in the qualifier than they played in the regular season. Again, though, you know, they played against Mirage and the Sonics. And the Sonics and Mirage both looked good, but it's not Space Station, it's not TSM, it's not Oxygen, right? And so that's always going to be an asterisk you put on those types of stats. Same thing we did when we talked about Mirage stats. Just an asterisk to keep in mind, but don't want to take anything away from the players that performed well. I think Dark Zero have just been a little bit more mental based and a little bit more momentum based than we'd like to admit them to be. Again, I think their fans and themselves, and even us as analysts who want to see them be the best that they can be, kind of picture them as this like robust, like this is the strat, we execute it perfectly, we're the best team, yada yada yada. But it seems like, you know, when emotions get high, I think it affects them more than they want it to affect them. And so I'm hoping that Dark Zero can kind of get things under control as they come into this major, because it does not look like a good season for them. You know, they're scraping their way into the major, just barely. They didn't look amazing in Phase 2. Like, some of these losses were just like, the TSM game, you know, that's for the money. And they had some really bad rounds, particularly like on Oregon and stuff, where it's just like, what is this team doing? Their game against Space Station in Phase 2 as well, was also had some bad rounds. So I hope Dark Zero can pick things up. They looked better in the qualifier, but that's against some lower level teams. But still, I mean, they've had some time to prepare. They've had some time to work on it. So I'm hoping that they can show up and really give us a good show, because they did look really good in the first split, and that included games against TSM. So who knows for Dark Zero? I think they're going to be somewhat of a wild card. I'm certainly not going to be predicting them until later on into the qualifier, when we sort of see what they're made out of and what type of Dark Zero we're seeing. So those are the 4 teams. That's my rundown. If I had to give a prediction, like 1 through 4, I'd probably say Space Station, Oxygen, TSM, Dark Zero. You know, it's really difficult just to say that, just to give a 1 through 4, because I think really all these teams are really close. I think that when people predict who's going to win, Space Station is going to have a huge margin. You know, Dark Zero and probably Oxygen as well are going to have quite lower likelihood to win based on fan predictions. But like, a lot of these games are going to be close to coin flips. You know, I don't think any team has more than like a 60% chance of winning any given matchup. That's sort of where we're at. So anything could happen in this major. It should be a really, really fun one. Again, August 14th, 15th, and 16th. This is releasing Saturday morning. So a week from today will be day 2 of the major. So Friday coming up, 6 days. That's going to be day 1. I'll be there. I was announced to be part of the talent. It's the whole NAL crew. So everybody that you know and love from the regular season of the NAL will be there to bring you the action. And it should be a lot of fun. So make sure you check that out. There's also, of course, the other regions. Do not forget to watch those majors. We have had APAC and LATAM going all of this week, and those will be finishing up, I believe, tomorrow on the Sunday. So make sure you watch those finals. Some of the smaller regions as well, such as South Asia, has already finished as the time of recording. I don't know which other of the small leagues finish today and which ones finish tomorrow. I don't know. But they're all wrapping up this weekend for LATAM and APAC. North America's next week. Europe will be the week after North America completes. And yeah, there should be a ton of fun games to watch. So thank you all for tuning in. Again, if you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. And I'll see ya on the next one. Have a good one. That's how it is.
Oh, nice.
Oh,
Did he
word.
really pull out his sensor on you?
What kind of...
Oh, cigar. He put it away.
Oh, that's not a teammate. Bro, there was the icon in the next room. And I saw him, and I'm like, that guy doesn't look like he's friendly. And he just missed every shot on the repelling skylight player. What the fuck is this?
Oh, poor dude.
And the Capcan trap.
Oh, no. Dude, this guy definitely saw me. Wait, look.